Hey Malcolm, have you ever made a video on how not to catch an edge on your snowboard? It would be helpful for all beginners. Well, thanks for that comment, RJ, and in answer to your question, no, I have not. So, let me get warmed up, take a couple of turns, and let's get right into making that video. So we all know that catching an edge is the worst thing, but an edge catch, it's not like some shark hiding beneath the surface, just waiting to get you completely at random. And there will become a point in your riding where you will just never catch an edge again. I mean, there's definitely things that you can do, adjustments you can make to your riding to make sure that that shark never gets you, to make sure that you never catch your edge. And simply put, an edge catch happens when you get your weight where it's not supposed to be, when you put your weight over the opposite edge to the one that you're riding on. So let me give you a common example, something that I see a lot when I'm teaching. So for instance, on the edge change, from toes to heels, a lot of people, when they're making that turn, they pull their hips back across the board too early in the turn. That means that back edge catches and you end up on the floor with a very sore tailbone. So having your weight not only in the right place, but in the right place at the right point in the turn is going to be very important. And we'll come onto all of that in a moment. Now, edge catches are far more likely to happen in a couple of situations. The first one is when you're riding quite a flat slope. The reason is, now if you imagine this is a slope, so here we've got quite a steep slope, and this is your board on its edge on that slope. And really, you've got quite a bit of wiggle room here. You know, you've got quite a lot of room for error to get your posture wrong and maybe dip that front or that back edge without it catching in the snow. But as soon as that slope is quite flat and you're trying to balance on your edge here, any tiny mistake just there is going to make that opposite edge catch in the snow and send you over. Now, the second situation where an edge catch is more likely to happen is when you're making more skidded turns. Because if you're riding the edge of your board, like I am now, the edge is going in the same direction that you are. It's not going in the opposite direction to which you're traveling, therefore it's much harder to catch it. Even when you roll onto your new edge, like there, we're still going in the same direction as it. But when we turn our turns into a more skidded turn, like this, I'm essentially going in the opposite direction to my edge. Right now, I'm traveling this way, but my edge is pointing that way. And by having this opposition of me wanting to go one way, but my board kind of skidding the other way, that's also going to make it quite likely to catch an edge if you do something just very slightly wrong. So if you're a beginner, you're probably thinking mellow slopes, yep, that's what I'm going to be riding, could catch an edge there, and also skidded turns, yep, that's what I'm doing. So that's like the ultimate recipe for an edge catch, which is why so many beginners give up on the snowboarding early, because it really is quite easy to catch an edge. But now I want to show you a few things that you can do to really make that far less likely. So let's begin with the ultimate skidded turn. I'm just going side slip to side slip, and I have no direction across the slope at all. Now we can make the edge change either by kind of simply standing up and sinking back down, or turning slightly more effectively with your front and then your back knee. And I'll explain that movement with a full sort of breakdown in this video up here, as well as putting it in the description below, as well as a bunch of other videos going over good posture and the movements we make at an edge change, because not catching an edge is really all about getting the fundamentals right. But simply put, to avoid an edge catch, it's all about getting your hips in the right place. Wherever your hips are, that's wherever you're sending your weight. So right now, I'm on my heel edge. You can see my hips are slightly behind the board, stacked vertically over my heels. as I make the edge change, I need to cross those hips over the middle of the board as the board rolls flat. Like so. And now on my toe edge, it's only very slightly, but my hips are pushed forward so that once again, they're stacked vertically over my toe edge. So it's really about getting this basic movement correct. And even with a really skidded turn like I'm doing right now, if you make that transition at the right point in the turn, if you cross your hips over the middle of the board as you roll it flat, then you'll be able to avoid that edge change too. Avoid that edge change? Avoid that edge catch. You want to make the edge change, you want to avoid the edge catch. Come on, get it together now. Okay, sure, so getting your hips in the right place, making sure they cross over the board at the right point of the turn. That's all well and good, but if you're a beginner, getting those movements exactly right, that can still be quite difficult, to be honest. So here's where we come on to the real no-brainer tip, the real simple thing you can easily do that will not only actually make your turns a lot easier, but it's going to make it far less likely for you to catch an edge. And that is simply, turning this skid into more of a diagonal skid across the slope. The more direction we can get across the slope, like I mentioned earlier, the more you're essentially riding your edge. So I'm still being very skidded at the moment, but I'm just pushing my front knee out very slightly. That's pulling me across the slope. And then I do the exact same movements for the turn, whether that's standing up or turning with my knees, and suddenly the board, it rolls way easier onto my new edge. And not only that, because I'm riding the direction of the edge, we're going in the same direction, me and the board, the edge catch is way, way less likely. So really guys, work on just pushing that knee across the slope in the direction you want to go and turning a skid into more of a diagonal side slip. Now, the next problem that sometimes happens when people are doing this, they get that side slip right, and you might not be on a piece as wide as where I am at now, and then you're about to make your turn and all of a sudden you're right at the edge of the slope. I don't get any room to get the board around, and you end up having to make that kind of quite tricky turn, maybe trying to jump it round, and here's a scenario where again you're quite likely to catch an edge. Okay, but guys, there's nothing stopping you from just thinking, wait a minute, I don't need to make my turn right now. I'll just go back this way a little bit. All of a sudden, I've got all the space in the world to come up and make my edge change with the board still going across the slope. And the more you can work that diagonal side slip, that diagonal skid, into more of a thin, clean line across the slope. So let me just show you my line there. The more you can turn it into that, again, the easier your life is going to be and the less likely you are to catch an edge. So practicing getting this thin traverse across the slope. Once again, it's about having good posture, but then it's just about making the right sort of lateral movement. That is leaning into the slope the right amount that you get yourself balanced on that edge, leaving that clean line. And if this video has been helping you guys out so far, it would be great if you could hit that like button, because that's just going to help kind of push this video out to more people that, like you, might benefit from it. So now, this next tip is kind of building upon from where we just left off. This idea of starting each turn in a clean traverse. Now, I'm on something pretty steep here, and if you're a beginner, a bit like what I just did, when you make a turn on something steeper, you're going to be skidding down the slope. But there's no reason we can't turn that skid into a clean traverse before every turn. So skid, 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 get your grip back, clean traverse into the next turn. So sure, this will stop you from catching an edge, but as I mentioned, it's not impossible, but it is a bit more tricky to actually catch an edge on something steeper. But really, this is just going to help your overall riding. Being able to turn that skid, getting down lower, leaning back into the slope, and turning that skid into a clean traverse, it's just a really good sign that you're in control of where you want your board to go and what you want it to do. But most importantly, it just makes that edge change far, far easier by finishing the turn in a clean traverse. Good. Traverse. It's so much easier to make the edge change. And a common beginner mistake is that when people get onto riding steeps, they obviously have a bit of skid at the end of the turn, but then they never get out of this skid and then try and make the edge change when they're still really going sideways down the slope, when all they need to do is hit the brakes a little bit more, sit down a bit lower, lean a bit more laterally into the slope, slow it down, make that clean traverse, and hey presto, you're going to be making much better turns and you're not going to catch that edge. So, to kind of recap some of the things we've been talking about, I'll put a load of videos down below. Having correct posture, being aware of the movements you can make to initiate the turn, whether that's simply by standing up and sinking down, or by kind of going with your front knee in first, steering with the knees. That's all going to help, but really the kind of simple, most basic tip to help you stop catching an edge is make sure you have direction across the slope, work your board out of a skid and into as much of a clean traverse as possible, and then really you're going to find that edge catches become way less common. And then, like I said at the beginning, that kind of mythical shark that's under the snow ready to catch your edge, he is going to be a thing of the past. So I really hope that's helped you. Appreciate you watching. And I do read through all your guys' comments, and I can't make every single video, but if you've got a good idea for something that you think might help yourself, your friends, or other people watching, then please drop it down below. Whew, that is me done. I'll see you next time.